Greetings, citizens of the internet. So, with all the censorship talk that's been going on with the Twitter files lately, and just a lot of tamping down of speech, a lot of inhibiting of speech, it got me thinking about how terrible the world would be without things like South Park or Howard Stern or Lil Wayne or any of the edgy things that are kind of always pushing that envelope, so to speak. Specifically South Park, because that show has just brought me so much joy over the years, and it's such a brilliant show. It's so well written, and there's so many layers to it, but it's also incredibly offensive. And I think at one point they're the people, Matt and Trey are the ones who actually said we're equal opportunity offenders. We hate everyone equally, or we make fun of everyone equally. Everyone, no one's safe, basically. They go after Christians, they go after Jewish people, they go after Scientology, they go after the Mormons, they go after liberals, they go after conservatives, they go after everybody. No one is safe from their comedic, what's the word I'm looking for? Scope on a gun. That doesn't sound right. They're comedic sites, whatever. They're comedic aim. From Kanye to the Pope, they make fun of everybody. So I ended up watching this interview with Matt and Trey, and it was really good. And so I clipped a couple quick pieces from it that I thought I would pull up. That's kind of what I view my role as in this world is, taking and distilling some of these long form pieces of content down to their juiciest bits for you, So check this out. This is a really good. So I think this first little bit is where they talk about a run-in they had with Subway, basically. So just listen to this.
See, they corner us a little bit that way. There's no chance to move.
But see, this is to me the scariest thing. It's honestly the scariest thing, because here we have in this, we love USA. We love to talk about our freedom of speech. We love to talk about it and what a free country we are. Here we are, and we cannot put a show on the air that we want on the air because of a sandwich company, right? And you've got this big corporation who is dictating what people are going to see and not see, and they don't want people to think badly of their Subway, Subway sandwiches. So this, we can't go on the air saying Subway sandwiches, which to me
is... you know what? See, we're indicting them. It's really us who are not letting them do it. We haven't even told Subway about this.
I love this.
We're assuming this is a dynamic, right?
This guy's like defending the
Subway cannot tell us what
client.
Kind of content we should. He's got to. They don't have to advertise on that show. They don't.
You can't blame him.
We talked about this.
He's got to keep money in the company.
We are actually going to go to them. We think they should advertise it. We think that would be the coolest thing to do.
I like that too. I like that attitude. Yeah.
Probably not.
Well, it's one thing. It's also one thing if Subway was an advertiser on South Park and we were doing a show where we were making fun of Subway. I think it would only be responsible for the network to go, hey, by the way, you bought this time during this time we're going to be making fun of you. And I think that's fair enough for them to go, you know what, we're not going to advertise on that. 30 minutes, that's fine. But what bugs us is that we're talking about their advertising during other programs on Comedy Central, and then they want to control.
Yeah,
something. They don't. We think they might want
do.
To.
But we'll take this risk, and we are going to say, go ahead, do the show, call it something else if you would, if it doesn't change the creative on it,
But we don't want to.
They don't want to, but they have to.
They have to. They have to.
That's censorship.
See, the First Amendment doesn't apply there, I guess.
Right.
Of course.
Yeah, absolutely right. Depends on how you look. Is the message not getting across that they want to make?
I feel like being a hardcore capitalist like I am, I feel like it's a company's. I guess it's their prerogative to do what they want to do with their money. But on the other hand, it's also just to me supremely un-American, and it should be called out every time it's done. And it's done this is all the networks. This kind of stuff should be out, and people should say, buyers should say, Subway's, we haven't indicted them yet. They haven't said anything, but any company that puts that kind of pressure, that's a supremely un-American move, and I'm going to boycott that company because that's what companies listen to.
But what we also, we don't.
So I think a couple things on that. first of all, that's economic censorship, right? And Trey kind of points to that. It's a sandwich company controlling what they can and can't say. And granted, they're speaking about that company specifically, but this guy Larry Divney, who is the former CEO of Comedy Central, I like what he said about it'd be cool if you did sponsor the content that's making fun of you. I know that me personally, if I had seen that episode and Subway did had a sense of humor about themselves and sponsored it, I would have thought a lot higher of them, for sure. But most companies don't see it that way. But back to the original point here is that's just one form of censorship here, is this economic censorship where you heard him. If they had made that episode and Subway had a problem with it, Subway can threaten to pull their ad budget, not only from their show, but from the whole network. So it becomes this, they weaponize, their control in that way. And in this case, you have a guy like Larry Divney who's progressive minded enough to work around that, but that when this happens at a company like a CNN or an MSNBC, more often than not the money is going to win, whereas I think a company like Comedy Central is a lot more apt to defend speech because of the nature of their content, right? It's comedians, whereas CNN and all these other kind of news networks are more likely to respond to that type of economic censorship, that type of pressure, by cutting a story, than say Comedy Central would cut South Park, which is one of their biggest moneymakers, I'm sure, has been for years. Anyway, so this next clip is pretty interesting.
No, but sometimes we're always fascinated by where everyone's like, oh, you're doing this and this is new and this is new, and we're like, well, thanks, but there have been a lot of people doing this stuff from Norman Lear with All in the Family to Lenny Bruce to George Carlin. I mean,
props to
like
Carlin.
Brand new to say that.
When Married with Children was on Fox, they had these immense problems. With
I like what he says here.
Advertisers wouldn't even be in the show. Married with Children now is a fine off-net syndicated show that everybody like. The line moves. It continues to move.
The line moves.
Society.
These guys have moved the line.
Where the fodder, where these guys go and pluck from, like what is going on.
There's some degree, but it also kind of goes like this because a fascinating story is we actually had a show last season where we wanted to say the N-word, right? No, cannot say no way can we say it.
Really? So then we just like,
okay, we're having a fight. Okay, how can we do this? And we finally got to the point where we could start to say it, and then we had to cut away. But basically, you knew
the character was saying.
This is before they did the Wheel of Fortune episode with Randy, where he says it,
and then you find out at the very end that Mr. Garrison, the teacher, is just a total racist, and says this word. And so we argued. If they
We're never going to have the N-word on our network.
You'll never have it on our network. So last week, Matt's in New York, and he's watching Comedy Central.
At 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
1 o'clock, and they're playing Blazing Saddles. And the N-word is all over it. And not bleeped, whatever. And we're just like...
I'm sorry.
That was really
busted.
I want to emphasize to the audience at home that before we sat down, we said you can say what you want. So the reference to the F word, the S word, and the N word, not imposed by us, no restriction on free expression. They're just being classy. So we appreciate that.
No, we know, we've got parents. We know how to talk around mom and dad. How to talk when grandma's in the house.
Whichever way.
Trey's ribbing them. So this last clip is really crazy because it's something that I never thought about that they talk about with the MPAA and the way it kind of enforces this hierarchy in Hollywood that I never really thought about, where he's talking about how they made the movie Orgasmo and the MPAA gave it an NC-17, and what that basically means is no one will be able to watch your movie. But the implications of that are basically, if you make something that's controversial and the MPAA doesn't like it, or someone on the MPAA doesn't like it and they want to censor it, they can just give it an NC-17 rating and no theaters will pick it up. Anyway, this was really interesting to me.
Adventures they have been.
And two movies, for your two movies, both of them were initially rated NC-17.
Right. There was Orgasmo, which was a movie that Trey mentioned that we did years ago before South Park was on the air, that we financed.
Hilarious if you've never seen it.
And then got picked up by October Films, which was, at the time wasn't owned by Universal. I think it is now. They were a
Predates
full
Book of
independent, they were a fully
Mormon.
independent company, and we got an NC-17, and we said, okay. Well, and at the time we were like, okay, well, what do we need to do? What do we need to?
And
cut?
just for the people who are watching this, that means like no one can see it.
You can't
Basically
see it,
means
but
your movie's dead. I mean, it really
because
does.
well, I mean, that's what it means is nobody under 17 allowed, with the parent or not, no one allowed. What it really means is no multiplex will carry your movie. There's very few, just independent, theaters.
Which is so wrong. I mean, just the NC-17 is a ridiculous notion that I, as a parent of my child, if I want to take him to Saving Private Ryan and it's NC-17, some organization can tell me I can't.
Yeah.
You know, that's my kid. You know, and I should be able. If I want to take him to a movie, I can take him to a movie.
Yeah.
And you know,
I'd rather
but
my kids see some of that stuff than some of the direct that's rated G and PG.
but the MPA is the scary, and we could go on forever.
This
but
interview is
because,
old too.
That's
I mean,
even
it's
scarier than a sandwich company sort of deciding what's on a show.
And
because-
you actually had a shot to negotiate with them.
well, you do only if
Only if you're a signatory. That's the difference between doing an independent movie and a studio movie. When we were doing an independent movie, they wouldn't return our phone calls.
because we were just these little nobodies who had made this $1 million movie, and at the time we were like, well, what can we change to get an R? And they said, well, we gave you an NC-17, and we can't tell you what to change because we're not a censorship group. That's what they tell you. Like, you are, and they're like, well, so we can't give you any specifics, and so then you have to go and do a thing where you go and basically get on your hands and knees and beg them. So I went in there and I'm all, just and there's these 80-year-old people all staring down at me, and I'm like, look, there's no nudity in this film, there's no sex in this film, it's all just language that you're giving this an NC-17 for, and I was stated my case. I'm like, okay, well, thank you, step outside and we'll tell you what we think. Step outside, and literally I didn't even get the chance to close the door before the guy comes out and goes, it's still an NC-17, and we're like, can we try again? No, it's just, you can, but it costs, you've got to do another Avid cut, you've got, it's so cost prohibitive. And so then the fascinating thing is we do the South Park movie, and that from the beginning is with Paramount Pictures, right? So the MPAA gets a cut way before the movie's even done, and we get a call from the studio going, so the MPAA think you need to take this out, and that out, and we're like,
They
wait
give
a
us
minute.
very specific notes.
Wait a minute, they wouldn't do this when
And
we
they-
were,
yeah.
they wouldn't, and I thought they were in a censorship group, and there was this whole process of the studio working with the MPAA to get that R, and them give and take and give and take and give and take. That is so frightening because it was a big studio movie. When I was just a filmmaker, when we were just filmmakers on our own trying to do this, they didn't give us the time
I know
of
that
day.
the MBA is illegal. I know it is. I know if someone was to challenge on legal grounds, it's basically a cartel basically setting up rules. The big guys get to set up the rules that even the little guys have to follow, but they have no say.
What did you have to lose to get South Park in the theater?
Well, we ended up every time they said cut this, we would put something back in that was worse.
Honestly, they made the movie worse. There's no
Yeah.
question.
They
And-
made that movie raunchier and raunchier.
But here's
I
the
love-
fascinating. Here's the
I love
fascinating
their
thing. Here's
attitude.
what it all came down to. So now we're a week away. We're a week away from the movie coming out, and it's still an NC-17. We've done this give and take, but we really kept just making it worse and worse because they just made us angry. And finally, Scott Rudin, the producer.
No,
From
there was
Paramount.
one joke, I can't remember what it was, and we called up and said, we are not cutting this joke.
Yeah.
I don't care what, you can...
It's just going to be an NC-17, so too bad. And it's a
then
week
Scott
away.
Rudin, and he's like, okay, I'll cut. Scott Rudin called somebody, probably Sherry Lansing. She called somebody else, and the next day the movie was an R, and not a frame of it changed.
Yeah.
So
it was just
wasn't about
Paramount
content,
Pictures
it was about
basically
politics.
finally telling the MPAA, you really need to make this an R. And they're like, okay, no.
Fascinating.
That's disgusting.
There was a time in this country where government was sort of leaning on creators, and now all the pressure comes.
I'd be
from
less
something
scared
like
of government
I'd
because
be
they'd be
less scared of
accountable
government, too.
because we could vote them out.
Exactly.
MPA is just there. It's like Star Chamber.
that. Great conversation. Thank you so much for coming.
Anyway, I thought this was a really interesting little conversation, and it gave me some insight into the film industry that I was completely unaware of. And I live in LA. I have a lot of friends who work in film. I got into a Directors Guild screening of a movie or two, but I didn't know that was the case. What he just said about the MPAA and how, starving artists, they got money to do Orgasmo. He said it was $1 million movie, but even with that kind of a budget, they got shut down. Now because of South Park's success and the success of their other projects, the rising tide lifts all boats. Like Orgasmo's, I'm sure, picked up by a bigger studio and distributed now because it's Matt and Trey's. But, at the time, they could have easily been completely censored and no one could have ever seen it. It could have just withered away in obscurity, just based on the whims of a few people. And that's kind of messed up. So anyway, I think these are just things that I've been thinking about with all the censorship stuff, because so many people I know are pro censorship, and I think what he described here with the MPAA has so many parallels to what's going on with the Twitter files and with social media censorship. The other thing I think is really cool about this story and the story of and Matt and Trey just on the whole is that if you write good material, you can overcome all obstacles. Like their South Park is such a it has heart. It's such a well written show, and there's so many layers to it. And at the end of the day, there's heart in it. You can tell that real thought and emotion is put into it, and it's well crafted. And these guys are serious about what they're doing every time they come out. And that carries through in the content. So I think when you have that as well, when you have that genuine layer of, or not even layer, you just have that genuine energy of high quality, I don't know the best way to describe it, but just it's a maybe just genuine energy. When you have that genuine energy, it kind of empowers you to say what you want, and gives you the ability to overcome some of these obstacles. Like these guys obviously have been able to be successful despite saying very controversial things that upset a lot of people, because they write such great material and they're so funny and their stories are so well thought out and have so many different layers of detail and thoughtfulness contained in them. So anyway, this is one of those things where I just thought, wow, these guys are such heroes, and they have been for such a long time. And I've been a huge fan for a long time, and I'm just in awe of all the stuff they do, and wanted to send a show of gratitude to Matt and Trey for being warriors of free speech throughout the years. So thanks, guys.